Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and today we're going to be heading to the Old West in our full in-depth review for Knott's Berry Farm's own GhostRider. This CCI wooden coaster originally opened on December 8th, 1998, and was officially retracked, reprofiled, and given new trains in 2016 by GCI, aka Great Coasters International. This world-famous roller coaster is located at Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California, and is also the tallest, fastest, and longest wooden coaster in the entirety of the state. This coaster features a height of 118 feet with a drop of 108 feet, reaching a speed of 56 miles an hour. In addition to that, there are 4,533 feet of track, and of course there's no inversions on this ride, as it is a more traditional L-shaped wooden coaster, but it does feature an incredible 14 airtime moments as well as a full duration of 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Now that you know everything you need to know numbers-wise about this incredible roller coaster, let's figure out how to get there. Thankfully, GhostRider is a very easy coaster to get to within Knott's, and you could argue it's actually the quickest coaster to get to in the entirety of the park. Once you enter into the park entrance proper, head over toward the left of the 3 roads that you come across, heading directly into Ghost Town itself. From this point, it'll be just past that mineral shop, and the front entrance is this awesome facade of an old mine. Once you enter into the line itself, you'll go through that mine and then eventually pop out next to a turnaround on the coaster, and you'll walk alongside the coaster till you get to the main queuing building. Inside this building is a mass of switchbacks before you'll head up a quick staircase and encounter another buttload of switchbacks. If this entire queue building is full, you're definitely going to be there for a couple hours. And if the line is all the way back to the main entrance, oh boy, you've got a long wait ahead of you. This lightly themed barn type of structure is kind of nice to sit in, especially on those hotter sunny days, but it can get a little overly hot at some points, especially if the entirety of the queue is full. That's a lot of bodies in there. Of course, before you know it though, you'll encounter one of 12 rows, and you'll be able to sit down on arguably the best coaster in the West. Taking your seat on GhostRider is just like a lot of GCI wooden coasters out there, the closest of which is Apocalypse at Six Flags Magic Mountain, so if you've been on that, you kind of know how this feels. But once you sit down, you'll be on kind of a firmer padding with a small divider in between the 2 seats per car. With that, you'll put on a seat belt, and of course, the lap bar will eventually come down, and it sits usually around your waist, if not a little bit higher towards your stomach. These seats are incredibly comfortable, at least to me, although on certain moments on this coaster, I could argue that they don't necessarily give enough support for some of the crazy lateral forces that you'll be encountering. So do keep that in mind, especially if you have some back problems. This ride is potentially not going to be for you. But with that all said, it's time to hold on and get going out of that station. Your experience on GhostRider starts with a quick little drop towards the left and a full 180 turn towards the lift hill. This section is kind of a nice way to start off. It gives you a little bit of speed as well as some lateral forces pushing you toward the left, as well as surround you in some nice little bits of scenery. Before you know it, you'll head up that lift hill underneath different parts of the structure and just next to that station, and you'll get a really cool view of at least Knott's backstage and the rest of Buena Park, even looking over towards Independence Hall. Before you know it, you'll come across that tunnel structure, that roof above the drop, which I gotta say adds quite a bit to that first drop, and you'll go down 51 degrees and 108 feet all the way towards the ground. This drop isn't too spectacular toward the front of the train, but in the back you definitely get some really nice amounts of airtime, and at the same time you get this really cool hand chopper with the roof feeling like it's gonna be right above your head. Immediately following this awesome first drop, you'll come across the first turn of the ride. That's right, you drop all the way down and then immediately turn to the left very quickly, and you'll feel a lot of those lateral and positive forces at the same time pushing you towards the right. At this point though, on your top left hand side is going to be the picture spot on this coaster, so make sure you pose right after that drop before you're vaulted up into the first massive airtime hill. And I gotta say, this is one of the best sustained moments of airtime in all of Southern California. It really just pushes you gently out of your seat for a good 4 or 5 seconds before slamming you back down. And don't be shocked if this is a moment where your restraint goes even a little bit farther down, and I'm not entirely sure how that's possible, especially with a lot of the time in the station me pushing down the restraint as far as I think it can really go. Immediately following that awesome airtime hill, and of course that first drop, which is incredible, you'll be pushed all the way up to another higher height and get a tiny bit of airtime potentially as you start to turn 180 degrees toward the left. This moment is your first real moment of extended lateral G-forces pushing you toward the right, and it lasts for quite a long time. Following this though, you'll encounter the next major drop on this coaster, which to me has always seemed not as steep as you'd expect, but it slowly kind of builds into this nice little bit of airtime, especially if you're sitting towards the back. It almost reminds me a little bit of Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain's first drop, with how it kind of feels tame towards the beginning, but a little more reckless towards the end. As you reach this bottom of the drop though, you'll be encountering a bunch of hand choppers, which is just a prevalent feature of this coaster, and it almost makes it feel like this coaster is going quicker than it actually is. Following that awesome hand chopper and that fun little drop, you'll kind of go upwards again into this interesting banked right hand turn, which doesn't do too much at first besides give a little bit of that sideways motion, but then it brings you into the next drop, dipping down right next to the actual first drop of the coaster, which just seems so much fun. This is one of those moments that you can definitely tell there was a little bit of that reprofiling done, because it does feel a little bit more modern in the way that it kind of twists upwards and then kind of stalls out a little bit and then flings towards that ground again. But this is a fantastic moment of those hand and head choppers, especially as you're underneath the biggest cluster of supports on the entire coaster. Immediately following this though, you'll kind of go upward into one of the higher points of the ride and flatten out completely. This originally was where a mid-course brake run was, but you're never going to slow down, at least at this present time. Before you reach that moment though, you will be kind of pushed towards the left in this entire plateau section, if you will, and get a fabulous view of Knott's Berry Farm, especially at night with all of its nighttime lighting. Before you know it though, you'll do another one of those 180 degree turns, kind of mirroring that first turn that began the entirety of GhostRider, and you'll get some nice lateral forces kind of shuffling toward the left a little bit. Then you'll go through this little straight section that used to be the full mid-course brake run and encounter realistically the most insane part of this ride. This drop off the mid-course, as we like to call it, is by far what feels like the steepest drop on this coaster. And boy oh boy, once you're in the back row for this ride, it gives some insane ejector airtime, vaulting you out of your seat as hard as possible. It also helps that at the same moment you get this insane airtime, you go right back into that mass of a structure that holds up the lift hill. And if you couldn't tell already, this is easily my favorite part of the coaster. But guess what? It does not stop being insane there. Following this is another reprofiled section for sure. You'll be pushed out of your seat quite violently, especially towards the front row, believe it or not, in a cool little sideways bunny hill. It just gives you a quick burst of airtime immediately following you hitting that top speed after that previous drop. At the same time, well, you'll start to twist left, just mirroring that first drop and turn again. This is definitely definitely some of my friends' favorite moments of the ride, but personally, I like that airtime a little bit more than that kind of lateral force there, but it's still a fantastic 1-2 punch for sure. Soon after, you'll pop up into another traditional airtime hill right over the road and get some decent airtime before kind of ending it a little soon and getting a little bit of weird positive forces followed by some lateral forces pushing you toward the right. This is just before you encounter a large right-handed turn with minimal banking, so you get some more insane lateral forces pushing you toward the left while you're underneath the structure. So it feels like you can't put your hands up anywhere because it's all surrounding you. As soon as you exit this big right-handed turn, you'll kind of dip down, getting a little bit of airtime, especially towards the back, and soon after get another amazing traditional airtime hill over the avenue, which of course will give you some awesome airtime no matter where you're sitting. Then you'll kind of be pushed upwards into the next airtime hill before kind of gently coming down into another one of the ride's plateaus. This is where you'll encounter the 360-degree helix, which is almost infamous for the amount of sideways G-forces that it gives you. It literally is, no joke, 10 seconds of straight up lateral G-forces with some awesome little tiny bits of floater airtime and some amazing hand choppers above. It feels like a tradition to kind of dance along to the side as you're pushing all the way to the left-hand side of the car, and it really feels never ending and is easily the best lateral G-force moment I can think of, at least that I've experienced thus far. It's not the most intense lateral Gs I've felt, but man, it being 10 seconds long, that sustained is just insane. Immediately following this, though, you'll kind of get pushed up into the final airtime hill, if you will, of the ride, although you realistically won't get much airtime here, and you'll find yourself on the final brake run. Soon after, you'll do an S-turn towards the station and find yourself getting out of that seat, getting your stuff from the bins on the other side of the station, and walking down the steps underneath the entirety of the structure. That's where you'll encounter the photo booth, and before you know it, you're back on that main road in Ghost Town, and your entire experience on GhostRider is now officially over. Well, it's time for my full thoughts and, of course, my ratings. Well, let's start with those thoughts. GhostRider is incredible. I absolutely adore this ride. I still think, personally, it's my favorite traditional wooden coaster. And even though it feels quite modern with its newer trains and its newer profiling, that layout itself just screams late 90s wooden coaster, and I adore that. It gives some brilliant airtime moments, and of course, it really shines with those lateral G-forces, and that's something that doesn't really exist on many coasters, at least in California. Add in those hand choppers, of course, it's just amazing all around. I mean, there is not really a bad part of this ride to me. There are some moments that might be considered a little bit more boring, but hey, it's a nice little breather in between sections for me, and it gives you some nice lateral forces most of the time, as well as a cool view. I will say for sure, though, I prefer the second half of this coaster compared to the first, just because there's more to it. There's a lot more of those airtime moments and lateral forces, and of course it lasts a little bit longer too. But that first drop and first airtime hill are truly immaculate, if you ask me too. While a lot of people always think that wooden coasters are really rough and shaky, GhostRider is the juxtaposition to that. It is one of the smoothest wooden coasters I've ever been on, period. And I would still argue it's the smoothest wooden coaster, at least in Southern California, and most likely the entirety of the West Coast too. Obviously, it's not butter smooth. You do have some of that classic feeling of a wooden coaster just kind of jittering you a little bit all around, but it is still ridiculously enjoyable for those non-regular coaster riders as well. A great part of this ride, though, is definitely the duration. It feels like it goes on forever, and you can definitely feel that it's one of the longer lasting coasters in the park, if not the entirety of California too. With all that said, though, I definitely have to start to mention my favorite and least favorite favorites. As I said earlier though, my favorite moment of the coaster is definitely that mid-course drop-off for sure. Now my least favorite part of the ride is probably that weird kind of turn before you get up to that mid-course portion, just because you don't really feel any forces of any kind outside of maybe a little bit of that lateral. In terms of least favorite and most favorite row though, I definitely gotta say my favorite row by far is that back. The front you can't really go wrong with either, but personally I'm much more of a back row lover on this coaster, and in terms of least favorite, probably somewhere in the middle, to be honest. So now let's head all the way over to our ratings, which if you haven't seen these reviews yet, make sure to check them out, obviously, but they're a little unorthodox. First, we're going to start with a ski slope rating, pretty much recommending how experienced of a coaster rider you should be before taking on GhostRider. After that, we'll have a 5-star rating for fun and intensity, and of course, my personal score out of 10. So starting with that ski slope rating, this is definitely a black diamond. You should be an experienced rider before taking on this thing. I will say though, it's not the most intense in the park, and I would highly recommend riding GhostRider before taking on Silver Bullet or Hang Time or Accelerator especially, and I would also recommend riding things like Sierra, Sidewinder, and maybe even Montezuma's Revenge before taking on GhostRider. Moving on to that intensity rating, this is going to be actually a 4-star rating for me, which might be a little higher than most people are thinking, but that wooden shuffle as well as a lot of those lateral G-forces and the hand choppers and of course that duration add into my entire intensity rating. This honestly would be probably closer to a 3-star rating most of the time, but those night rides, ooh man, it gets insane. And out of a 5-star rating for fun, it's easily 5 out of 5 stars. This thing is ridiculously fun. Add in those night rides. Oh my gosh, as I just mentioned, the night rides are legendary. If you can only ride GhostRider once, definitely wait till the end of the day, till the sun has gone down, because it's a different beast altogether. And I would argue it's still my favorite night ride to this day. Of course, with those star ratings for intensity and fun, you can kind of see where I'm heading with my rating out of 10, and it's easily a 10 out of 10. This thing is phenomenal from start to finish, and I absolutely love GhostRider. It is for sure one of my personal favorite coasters of all time, and to me, it is a star in all of the state of California. I think it's one of those rides that every thrill seeker should experience, and it's realistically, at least for a lot of thrill seekers, the #1 reason to go to Knott's. Although Knott's has quite a few amazing things outside of that thrill. With that all said though, I'm very curious, what do you guys think of GhostRider? Make sure to let me know down in the comments below, and of course, while you're down there, make sure to check out that description for links for our Instagram, Discord, and of course our Parks Bros pins. And I would really appreciate it if you have not yet. Make sure to subscribe. We've got more reviews coming from Knott's and other parks beyond. But with that all said, I want to say thank you so much for watching. It really means a heck of a lot. But until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.